Top 1. The Waldseemüller Map. The Waldseemüller Map is a singular piece of paper on this earth that gave America its name. This one map was printed in 1507, and while 1,000 copies were originally made, every single one had vanished by the 20th century. The world's greatest libraries possessed no record of it, leading historians to assume it had been destroyed. Then in 1901, a Jesuit priest discovered the only surviving copy hidden inside a dusty book in a remote German castle. It had been sitting there unseen for nearly 400 years. That map, the one that named the entire Western Hemisphere, also showed an ocean that no European was supposed to have known existed yet. Furthermore, the man who drew it later tried to erase what he had created. Martin Waldseemüller was a German cartographer working in Saint-Dié, a small scholarly town in what is now France. In 1507, he and his colleagues produced a large woodcut map of the world that stretched across 12 separate printed sheets. When assembled, it measured roughly 8 feet wide and 412 feet tall. At the center of the western landmass, in clean printed letters, Waldseemüller wrote a single word: America. It was the first time in all of human history that the word had ever appeared on a map. He named it in honor of the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci, who had argued that the lands Columbus reached were not Asia, but an entirely separate continent. 1,000 copies of this map were printed and distributed across Europe, yet within decades, not a single one could be found. What makes this map deeply unsettling is not just the name, but what else Waldseemüller drew. On the western edge of the American continent, he depicted a vast, open ocean, a body of water clearly separated from the Atlantic. That ocean is the Pacific. The problem is that no European had officially crossed or confirmed the Pacific Ocean in 1507. Vasco Núñez de Balboa would not reach the Pacific coast until 1513, and Ferdinand Magellan would not cross it until 1520. Yet Waldseemüller drew it with surprising accuracy 6 years before Balboa even laid eyes on it. No known source from that era explains where that information came from. Then Waldseemüller did something that has never been satisfactorily explained. On his follow-up maps published in 1513 and 1516, he removed the word America entirely, replacing it with terra incognita, meaning unknown land. He also erased the Pacific. In a written note accompanying his revised work, he stated that his earlier map had been filled with error, wonder, and confusion. He offered no specific correction and named no source he had abandoned. He simply walked back everything without explanation. In 2003, the Library of Congress purchased the only surviving copy of the 1507 map for $10 million, calling it America's birth certificate. It is kept under strict preservation conditions in Washington, D.C. The questions Waldseemüller left behind were never answered. No one has explained how he knew what he drew, and no one has explained why he chose to forget it. Top 2. The Tabula Rogerana. In 1154 AD, a Muslim geographer arrived at the court of a Christian king in Sicily and spent 15 years building what would become the most accurate map on Earth. He engraved it on a solid silver disc weighing 300 pounds. The map showed the world upside down, with south at the top. It accurately showed the source of the Nile River 700 years before European explorers found it. When the king died, a mob destroyed the silver disc, and the knowledge on it was hidden in Arabic for another 500 years. Muhammad al-Idrisi was born in Ceuta, in present-day Morocco, around 1100 AD. He was a scholar trained in Cordoba, one of the greatest centers of learning in the medieval world. Around 1138 AD, he accepted an invitation from King Roger II of Sicily, a Norman Christian ruler known for his unusual openness to Islamic scholarship. The two men formed one of the most unlikely intellectual partnerships in history. Together, they set out to document the entire known world in a single definitive map. Al-Idrisi spent 15 years gathering information, interviewing thousands of travelers, merchants, sailors, and traders from across Africa, Asia, and Europe. King Roger II participated in the interviews personally, cross-examining sources and demanding verification before any detail was accepted. The result was a geographic record of extraordinary precision. When the work was finally complete, Al-Idrisi engraved the full map onto a solid silver disc, approximately 6 feet in diameter, weighing around 300 pounds. He also produced a written geographic companion titled the Book of Pleasant Journeys into Faraway Lands. In the Western world, the work became known as the Tabula Rogerana. The map was drawn with south at the top and north at the bottom, which was standard orientation in many Islamic cartographic traditions of that period. Mecca sat at the center while Europe appeared at the bottom. The proportions of continents, the positions of major rivers, and the outlines of coastlines were more accurate than anything produced in Europe at that time. Among its most remarkable features was the depiction of the Nile River's source deep within the African interior. European explorers would not physically confirm the source of the Nile until the 1860s, more than 700 years later. When King Roger II died in 1154 AD, the political stability of Sicily collapsed. During the unrest that followed, a mob attacked the royal court, and the silver disc was destroyed. It has never been recovered. What survived were 10 handwritten manuscript copies of the map preserved separately. These copies kept the knowledge alive, but in Arabic, a language inaccessible to most of Western Europe. The map was not translated into Latin until the 1600s. For 3 uninterrupted centuries, it remained the most accurate world map in existence. Yet almost no one in Western Europe knew it existed. Historians have noted that an earlier translation could have fundamentally redirected the age of discovery. The routes, the coastlines, and the river systems were all already documented. It was simply written in the wrong language for the wrong audience at the wrong moment in history. Top 3. The Cantino planosphere. In 1502, a spy bribed a cartographer inside the Portuguese royal court. The map he stole contained knowledge so dangerous that Portugal classified it as a state secret and destroyed every copy after each voyage. Copying it was punishable by death. The spy smuggled it out of Lisbon, hidden in his luggage. That stolen map, the Cantino planosphere, is the earliest surviving map to show the Americas with accuracy. It only exists today because a spy risked his life to take it. Alberto Cantino was not a cartographer or a sailor. He was an agent working on behalf of Ercole d'Este, the Duke of Ferrara in northern Italy. In the early 1500s, the Portuguese were the undisputed leaders of global exploration. Their navigators had charted coastlines across Africa, Asia, and the newly discovered lands of the Western Hemisphere. But Portugal guarded this information with extreme aggression. Every sea chart produced from a royal voyage was treated as classified government property. Sailors were sworn to secrecy, cartographers worked under strict supervision, and when charts were no longer needed, they were destroyed. The deliberate erasure of geographic knowledge was Portuguese policy. Cantino arrived in Lisbon under the cover of purchasing horses for the Duke. What he was actually doing was searching for someone inside the Royal Cartographic Office who could be bought. He found that person. The identity of the Portuguese cartographer who accepted the bribe has never been confirmed. What is known is that Cantino paid 12 gold ducats for a secretly copied map, wrapped it carefully, and smuggled it out of Portugal without detection. He delivered it to Ferrara in late 1502. What that map contained was extraordinary. The Cantino planosphere showed the coastline of Brazil, which Pedro Álvares Cabral had only reached in 1500, just 2 years earlier. It depicted the western coast of Africa with remarkable precision. It showed portions of North America, the Caribbean, and the Indian Ocean trade routes. The Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn were marked with an accuracy that would not be matched on European maps for decades. The details suggested access to survey data, navigational logs, and coastal measurements that Portugal had never made public. The map also showed the boundary established by the Treaty of Tordesillas, the 1494 agreement between Portugal and Spain that divided the newly discovered world between them along a specific meridian line. The placement of this line on the Cantino planosphere confirmed that Portugal already knew Brazil fell within their designated zone before Cabral's voyage was ever officially announced. The implications of that detail have never been fully addressed by historians. The map eventually left Ferrara during the political chaos of the late 1500s and was later discovered in a butcher shop in Modena, being used as a wall decoration. It was recovered and transferred to the Biblioteca Estense in Modena, Italy, where it remains today. It has not moved from that city in over 500 years. It is the oldest surviving map to show any part of the Americas with geographic accuracy, and it exists for one reason only. Someone broke the law to copy it, and someone else was willing to pay for it. Top 4. The Zeno map. In 1558, a Venetian nobleman invented an island and put it on the map. Not a small island, but one bigger than Ireland. He called it Friesland. The world's greatest cartographers, including Mercator himself, copied it onto their maps. Nations sent explorers to find it, and England's top advisor claimed it for Queen Elizabeth. For over 100 years, every world map on Earth showed an island that never existed. Nobody officially declared it a lie. It just quietly disappeared. Niccolo Zeno the Younger was a member of one of Venice's most respected noble families. In 1558, he published a book containing letters and a map that he claimed belonged to his ancestors. Two brothers named Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, who he said had sailed the North Atlantic in the late 1300s. According to his account, these ancestors had discovered a large island between Iceland and Greenland, which they called Friesland. The map accompanying the book showed this island in considerable detail, complete with coastlines, place names, and surrounding geography. It looked authoritative, researched, and real. The timing of the publication was not accidental. By the mid-1500s, Spain and Portugal had claimed credit for discovering the Americas. Venice, once the dominant power in European trade and exploration, had been left out of the narrative entirely. Zeno's fabrication was a deliberate act of cartographic nationalism. By placing his ancestors in the North Atlantic nearly a century before Columbus sailed in 1492, he was constructing a claim that Venice had discovered the Western world first. The phantom island of Friesland was not a geographic error. It was a political weapon dressed as a map. The deception worked completely. Gerardus Mercator, whose 1569 map projection is still the foundation of modern world maps, included Friesland without question. Abraham Ortelius added it to his 1570 atlas, which was one of the most widely distributed geographic references in Europe. When the English explorer Martin Frobisher sailed into the North Atlantic in 1578, searching for the Northwest Passage, he spotted Greenland and genuinely believed he had found Friesland. He reported this to the English crown. John Dee, the royal advisor to Queen Elizabeth II, formally claimed Friesland as English territory in 1580, basing the claim entirely on the Zeno map. England had just claimed sovereignty over an island that did not exist. Expeditions were planned, routes were calculated, and sailors prepared to land on Friesland's shores. Every voyage returned with nothing because there was nothing to find. But rather than triggering suspicion, failed expeditions were blamed on bad weather, navigational error, or simple misfortune. The island remained on maps decade after decade because no single authority was willing to publicly declare that the world's most respected cartographers had been fooled. Friesland began disappearing from maps slowly in the late 1600s, not through any formal announcement or official correction, but through quiet omission. Cartographers simply stopped drawing it. No declaration was made, and no retraction was published. One of the greatest acts of sustained geographic deception in human history ended not with exposure, but with silence. Top 5. The Buache map in 1737, 83 years before Antarctica was officially discovered, a French geographer drew a map showing the continent divided in two, split by a central waterway. He said he was working from ancient sources. Scientists dismissed it for 200 years. Then in the 1950s, seismic surveys confirmed the subglacial channel is real, exactly where Buache drew it in 1737. It is completely invisible under miles of ice. Nobody in 1737 could have seen it. The question is, who did? Philippe Buache was no amateur. He was one of the most respected cartographers in 18th century Europe, appointed as the official royal geographer of France in 1729. He was known for his systematic approach to map-making and his insistence on working from documented sources rather than speculation. In 1737, he presented a map to the French Academy of Sciences showing a large southern continent at the bottom of the world. He called it a geographic reconstruction based on ancient charts whose origins he could not fully identify. The continent he drew was not a vague landmass. It had defined coastlines, interior terrain features, river systems, and most strikingly, a clear central channel dividing it into two distinct landmasses separated by open water. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, when separate expeditions from Russia, Britain, and the United States first sighted its coastline. Even after its discovery, the interior of the continent remained almost entirely unknown, for another century. The ice sheet covering Antarctica averages over 1 mile in thickness, in some places reaching nearly 3 miles deep. Nothing beneath that ice was visible to any observer standing on the surface, and no technology existed to look through it. During the International Geophysical Year of 1957 and 1958, a coordinated global scientific effort deployed seismic surveys across Antarctica for the first time. These surveys sent sound waves through the ice to map the bedrock underneath. What they found confirmed something that had not been expected. Beneath the ice sheet, the Antarctic continent is not a single unified landmass. It is divided by a subglacial basin and waterway running through its interior, separating what scientists now call East Antarctica and West Antarctica into two geologically distinct regions. The division Buache had drawn in 1737 matched the confirmed subglacial geography with a precision that could not be easily dismissed. Buache himself had offered a theory. He believed Antarctica had once been a temperate continent, possibly inhabited before being overtaken by ice over thousands of years. He suggested his ancient source charts had been produced during a period when the terrain was still visible above the surface. Modern science has since confirmed that Antarctica was indeed once a warm, vegetated landmass before the ice sheet formed, a process that began approximately 34 million years ago. No nation had conducted any exploration of Antarctica in 1737, and no instrument available in that century could have detected subglacial geography. Buache named no specific ancient source, and no surviving document has been identified that could explain his accuracy. The subglacial channel he drew remained unconfirmed for 220 years after he published the map. When confirmation finally came, it arrived not from historical research, but from scientific equipment that did not exist in his lifetime. Top 6. The Juan de la Cosa map. Columbus's own navigator, the man who captained his flagship, drew a map in 1500 showing a North American coastline covered with English flags. The problem is that no English explorer had explored more than a tiny stretch of Canadian coast by that date. This map shows thousands of miles more. Columbus himself had not come close to North America. So where did the coastline come from, and who had mapped it before anyone was supposed to have been there? Juan de la Cosa was not a minor figure in the history of exploration. He was the owner and master of the Santa Maria, the largest of the 3 ships Columbus commanded on his first voyage in 1492. He sailed with Columbus again on the second voyage in 1493 and the third in 1498. By 1500, he was arguably the most experienced and well-connected maritime navigator in all of Spain. He had access to information that ordinary sailors and scholars did not. When he drew a map, it carried the weight of direct experience and insider knowledge. The map he produced in 1500 is now recognized as the first European map to show any part of the American continent. It is painted on oxide and measures roughly 3 feet by 6 feet. It depicts Europe, Africa, Asia, and the newly encountered lands of the Western Hemisphere in considerable detail. The Caribbean islands that Columbus had explored are present, and Central America appears along the southern portion, but it is the northern section of the map that has never been satisfactorily explained. Along what appears to be the North American coastline, de la Cosa drew an extensive stretch of coast marked with a series of English flags. This notation indicated that the territory had been claimed or explored by English expeditions. The only English explorer known to have reached North America by 1500 was John Cabot, who made his first voyage in 1497 and reached what is believed to be the coast of Newfoundland or Nova Scotia. Cabot's documented journey covered a relatively short stretch of coastline in the far northeast. The coastline on de la Cosa's map extends far beyond anything Cabot's recorded voyage could account for. No second English expedition of comparable scale has ever been confirmed in the historical record for that period. Columbus himself had never approached the North American mainland. His voyages had taken him through the Caribbean and to the coast of South America. The North American coastline on de la Cosa's map could not have come from Columbus's own observations, nor could it have come solely from Cabot's single recorded crossing. Yet it is there, drawn with enough consistency and shape to suggest it was based on actual navigational data rather than guesswork. Spain classified the map and kept it from public knowledge for centuries during a period when competing European powers were aggressively claiming territory across the Americas. The map did not become publicly known until the early 1800s, when it was discovered in a private collection in Paris. It is now held at the Museo Naval in Madrid. Historians have debated its implications ever since. The coastline exists on the map, but the expeditions that could explain it do not exist in any confirmed record. That gap has never been closed. Top 7. The Fra Mauro map. In 1450, a Venetian monk drew a map showing the sea route around the southern tip of Africa 38 years before any European explorer officially sailed it. He also drew Japan and the Indian Ocean with detail that should not have been possible without first-hand knowledge. Next to the Cape of Africa, he wrote a note saying a ship had already sailed around it 70 years before his time. If he was right, someone completed one of history's greatest voyages, and history never recorded their name. Fra Mauro was a monk living in the monastery of San Michele on the island of Murano, just outside Venice. He was not a sailor or an explorer, and never left Italy. Yet beginning sometime in the 1440s, he undertook the most ambitious cartographic project of the medieval world. He gathered information from merchants returning from Asia, traders who had crossed African interior routes, navigators who had sailed Indian Ocean passages, and travelers whose accounts had never been formally recorded anywhere. He cross-examined sources, compared testimonies, and built a picture of the world from thousands of individual pieces of reported knowledge. The result was a circular map nearly 6 feet in diameter, drawn on a single sheet of vellum containing thousands of annotated place names written in Italian. The map was completed around 1450 and delivered to the King of Portugal, who had commissioned a copy for navigational research. Fra Mauro died shortly before the final version was fully completed, and his assistant Andrea Bianco finished the remaining details. What the map shows has troubled historians for generations. The southern tip of Africa appears on the map with a clearly defined cape, and the sea route curving around it from the Atlantic into the Indian Ocean is depicted with unmistakable intent. Bartolomeo Dias became the first European officially recorded around the Cape of Good Hope in 1488. Fra Mauro drew it 38 years earlier. The map also shows the island of Japan positioned correctly to the east of the Asian mainland, and the general shape of the Indian Ocean is rendered with an accuracy that far exceeded any European geographic knowledge of the period. Next to the southern Cape of Africa, Fra Mauro included a written annotation. In it, he described a vessel he called an Indian junk, which he claimed had sailed around the southern tip of Africa from the Indian Ocean side approximately 70 years before his own time, placing the journey somewhere around 1380 AD. He wrote that the ship had traveled far into the southern Atlantic before turning back. He provided this information without naming a specific source, stating only that it came from accounts he considered credible. If Mauro's note is accurate, it means the sea route around Africa was completed more than a century before Dias made the journey that history officially credits. It would also mean that whoever made that earlier voyage left no surviving record in any European, Arab, or Asian archive that has yet been found. The original Fra Mauro map is preserved at the Biblioteca Nazionale Marciana in Venice. Historians continue to study it, but the annotation near the Cape of Good Hope has never been explained, and the source Mauro used to draw the southern African coastline has never been identified. Top 8. The Oronce Fine map. In 1960, a historian was searching the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., when he found a map from 1531. It showed Antarctica in the correct location, but without ice, featuring rivers, bays, and mountain ranges. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, but what made this different from any other ancient Antarctica map was that the United States Air Force reviewed it. In an official written letter, they confirmed the geographical details matched their own military surveys. The features were real, and they had been hidden under the ice for over 10,000 years. Oronce Fine was a French mathematician and cartographer who worked during the early 16th century. He taught mathematics at the Royal College of France and was considered one of the leading scientific minds of his era. In 1531, he produced a map of the world using a heart-shaped projection that was considered mathematically sophisticated for its time. At the bottom of that map, he drew a large southern continent. He labeled it with a Latin inscription that translated roughly as recently discovered, but not yet completely explored. The continent he drew sat precisely where Antarctica sits today. The map was filed away in the Library of Congress and received little serious academic attention for decades. In 1960, Charles Hapgood, a history professor at Keene State College in New Hampshire, was conducting research into ancient cartography when he pulled the Oronce Fine map from the library's collection. What he saw stopped him. The southern continent on the map did not resemble the vague, speculative land masses that commonly appeared on 16th century maps. It had defined bays, river systems, mountain ranges, and a clearly shaped coastline. One feature in particular caught his attention immediately. The area corresponding to the Ross Sea, which today lies beneath a floating ice shelf hundreds of meters thick, was drawn as a wide-open bay with no obstruction. Hapgood contacted the cartographic section of the United States Air Force Strategic Air Command in 1961. He presented the map and asked for a formal evaluation, comparing it against modern military survey data of Antarctica gathered during the 1950s. The Air Force responded in writing. Their official letter stated that the map showed geographical detail consistent with what their own seismic and aerial surveys had confirmed existed beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. The rivers, coastal features, and the open Ross Sea Bay all corresponded to subglacial geography that no surface observer in 1531 could have seen. Oronce Fine himself stated that his southern continent was drawn from ancient source charts he had consulted. He did not name those sources, and no document has since been identified that could explain where his information originated. Antarctica has been continuously covered by an ice sheet for a minimum of 10,000 years, and by most scientific estimates, considerably longer. To have mapped its ice-free terrain with the accuracy reflected on the 1531 map would have required direct observation during a period that predates any known organized civilization capable of ocean navigation. The Air Force letter confirming the map's accuracy was documented by Hapgood in his 1966 book. No official government body has publicly revisited the question since. The map remains in the Library of Congress, and the source Oronce Fine used to draw it has never been found. Top 9. The Haji Ahmed map. In 1559, an Ottoman cartographer published a world map showing the western coast of the Americas in detail at a time when no European had mapped it. He also drew a wide land connection between Asia and North America in the North Pacific. That connection, the Bering Land Bridge, disappeared under the sea 11,000 years ago, long before recorded history. Yet here it is on a 1559 map, a map that almost nobody talks about. Haji Ahmed was an Ottoman scholar working in the mid-16th century. Very little is known about his personal biography, which itself is unusual for a cartographer of his apparent sophistication. In 1559, he published a world map that circulated within Ottoman geographic and scholarly circles. It did not receive significant attention in Western European academic literature for centuries. When historian Charles Hapgood analyzed it in his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, he identified details in the map that had no satisfactory explanation within the framework of known 16th century exploration. By 1559, Spanish expeditions had begun probing portions of the California coastline, but their surveys were incomplete, poorly documented, and largely unpublished. The northern Pacific coast of North America, stretching from the Pacific Northwest toward Alaska, was entirely unknown to European navigators. No confirmed European expedition had reached those waters. The western coast of South America had been explored only partially following Francisco Pizarro's campaigns in the 1530s, and accurate coastal charts of that region were still being developed. The northern Pacific as a whole remained one of the largest unmapped regions on Earth. The Haji Ahmed map shows the Pacific coastline of both North and South America with a proportional accuracy that Hapgood found to be superior to most European maps of the same coastline produced during the same century. The general shape of the Western American coast, the positioning of the continents relative to Asia across the Pacific, and the overall proportions of the Pacific Ocean itself all appear with a consistency that went beyond what any documented expedition of the era could have produced. Hapgood noted that the map suggested access to source material that predated the 16th century explorations entirely. The most striking detail is in the far north, between the northeastern tip of Asia and the northwestern edge of North America. The Haji Ahmed map shows a broad land connection. The two continents do not sit separated by open water as they do on modern maps. They are joined. That connection corresponds geographically to what scientists now call the Bering Land Bridge, a stretch of land up to 1,000 miles wide that connected present-day Siberia to present-day Alaska during the last ice age. As global temperatures rose and ice sheets melted, sea levels increased and the land bridge was submerged beneath the waters of the Bering Strait. This process was complete approximately 11,000 years ago. No human civilization with confirmed ocean mapping capability is known to have existed 11,000 years ago. The land bridge appears on no other 16th century map with the same clarity. Haji Ahmed left no explanation for its presence and named no ancient source. Hapgood's analysis of the map remains one of the few serious academic treatments it has received. The question he raised in 1966 has not been answered since. Top 10. The Piri Reis map. In 1929, workers renovating a palace in Istanbul found a map that had been forgotten for 400 years. Drawn in 1513 on gazelle skin, it showed Antarctica ice-free with rivers and mountains 307 years before it was discovered. It showed the longitudes of South America with an accuracy that was scientifically impossible in 1513. The tool needed to calculate longitude that precisely, the marine chronometer, was not invented until the 1700s, 2 centuries later. The man who drew it wrote on the map itself that one of his sources came from the personal library of Alexander the Great, who died in 323 BCE. If that source existed, if someone mapped Antarctica thousands of years before recorded history, then everything we believe about the story of human civilization is wrong. Piri Reis was an Ottoman admiral and cartographer of considerable reputation. He had spent decades at sea, participated in naval campaigns across the Mediterranean, and was known within the Ottoman Empire as a serious and methodical compiler of geographic knowledge. The map bearing his name is not a casual sketch. It is a carefully constructed document drawn on gazelle-skin parchment depicting the Atlantic Ocean with the western coast of Africa on one side, the eastern coast of South America on the other, and a large landmass along the southern edge that corresponds in shape and position to Antarctica. The map is a fragment. The right half has never been found. What Piri Reis wrote directly onto the map has never been fully resolved by historians. In his own annotations, he stated that he compiled the map from approximately 20 older source charts. He described these sources as coming from various origins, including charts used by Christopher Columbus, Portuguese navigational maps, and Arabic geographic documents. Most significantly, he claimed that one of his source maps had come from the library of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who died in 323 BCE. If that claim is taken literally, it points to a source document more than 1,800 years older than the Piri Reis map itself. The Antarctic coastline shown on the map has been the subject of serious scientific comparison. When the continent was first physically explored in the 20th century, seismic surveys revealed the shape of the land beneath the ice sheet. The subglacial coastline, invisible under miles of accumulated ice, corresponded in multiple key areas to the coastline drawn on the 1513 map. The continent has been covered by ice for a minimum of 10,000 years. Mapping its actual terrain would have required observation during a period that no known civilization is documented to have existed with sufficient maritime capability. The longitude problem is equally serious. In 1513, European navigators had no reliable method of calculating longitude at sea. Latitude could be estimated using the stars, but longitude required precise timekeeping that the technology of the era could not provide. The marine chronometer, the instrument that finally solved the longitude problem, was not developed until the mid-1700s. Independent analyses of the Piri Reis map conducted in the 20th century found that the relative longitudes of the African and South American coastlines were accurate to within a degree, a level of precision that should not have been achievable with any instrument or method available in 1513. The map is held today at the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul. It is rarely displayed. The fragment that survives represents only a portion of what Piri Reis originally drew. Whatever occupied the missing half has not been located in any archive, collection, or private holding anywhere in the world. The source charts he referenced have never been found. The civilization that may have originally mapped an ice-free Antarctica has never been identified, and the method used to calculate those longitudes in 1513 has never been explained. If these maps have changed the way you look at the history of our world and the secrets hidden beneath the ice, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history that they have tried to bury. Help us plant the seeds of the future by understanding our past. The next treasure of knowledge will be open soon.